Daddy, do I have to sit here the whole time? Dylan's tiny voice tugged at Jacob Miller's heart as he knelt beside the stack of chairs he was unloading. Jacob wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and gave his 6-year-old son a tired smile. Just a little longer, buddy. I promise, then we'll go get pancakes, extra whipped cream. Dylan scrunched his nose like he was thinking hard, then nodded solemnly. Okay, but only if I get 2 cherries. Jacob laughed softly, ruffling his son's hair. Deal. It wasn't the dream life, but it was theirs. After losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, Jacob had been doing every odd job he could get just to keep their tiny apartment and put food on the table. Setting up tables for some fancy gala wasn't glamorous, but it paid cash and came with leftover food. He moved to the next table, balancing a stack of folded white linens, when a voice behind him said, "Those go on the tables with the gold-rimmed plates, not the silver." He turned around and froze. She was standing there in a loose white blouse tucked into slim black pants, clipboard in hand, hair pulled back in a twist that still somehow made her look effortlessly stunning. Not glamorous real, soft brown eyes, a faint dimple when she blinked. "Got it," he said, adjusting the linens and placing them down carefully. She tilted her head slightly. "You're not one of the regular staff." "No," he said, "just a guy trying to keep the lights on. Name's Jacob." She smiled. "Kiera, and thank you for helping." "Honestly, most people would have walked out after seeing how much work we still have left," he shrugged. "I've done worse. And my son's getting a free lesson in patience today." Kiera glanced over at the little boy sitting on a folded coat in the corner, munching on a granola bar, his sneakers swinging above the floor. "That's your son?" she asked. "Yeah, Dylan. He usually stays with a neighbor, but she had a doctor's appointment today." Kiera gave a small nod. "He looks happy." Jacob smiled faintly. "He is, somehow. He's stronger than I am." They worked together for another hour. Kiera gave instructions. Jacob followed, and even though they didn't talk much, there was something comfortable about the silence between them. Every now and then, she'd sneak a glance at him lifting heavy tables like they weighed nothing. Once he caught her looking, and she quickly looked away, pretending to write something. Later, as Jacob was carrying a floral centerpiece larger than his torso, Kiera caught up to him. "Hey," she said, "are you free tonight?" He blinked. "Tonight," she hesitated. "It's just there's an extra suit in the back from one of the caterers who canceled, and you've already done half the work setting this place up. I thought, maybe you'd want to stay for the gala." He laughed quietly. "I think I'd stick out. You'd blend in just fine." He looked at her, trying to read her expression. There was no pity in her eyes, just something warm, something real. "I don't have anyone to watch Dylan. I'll set up a small guest room backstage," she said quickly. "We've got a babysitter for the donors who bring their kids. He can hang out there, plenty of mac and cheese." Jacob hesitated. It had been so long since he'd been invited anywhere that didn't involve a wrench or a mop. "I guess I could stay an hour." Kiera grinned. "Good. I'll have someone bring the suit." He raised an eyebrow. "You always get this involved with table setters." She gave a half smile. "Only the ones who look like they haven't had a night off in 6 years." The gala was a blur of crystal chandeliers, tuxedos, and champagne flutes. Jacob stood near the back, uncomfortable in the suit that fit far too well, watching people with wallets thicker than his rent bill sip wine that probably cost more than his car. Dylan was in the back room with a movie, happy as could be, and Kiera. She was across the ballroom, talking to some older man in a navy suit. She laughed at something he said, but then her eyes drifted over to Jacob, and that smile softened. She excused herself and walked toward him, heels clicking across the marble floor. "I thought you'd left," she said, handing him a glass of something sparkling. "Still here, waiting for the mac and cheese reviews to come in." She laughed, then looked up at him, her voice quieter. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too," he said before he could stop himself. They stood there, the noise of the gala buzzing around them like static, and for a moment it felt like they were the only 2 people in the room. He glanced at her, then away. "So what's your role in all this? You seem to know everyone." She hesitated. "I help run the foundation." "You're the manager," her gaze flickered. "Something like that." Before he could ask more, a woman with a sparkly dress and sharper voice interrupted. "Kiera, darling, the press is waiting for your speech." Jacob furrowed his brow. Speech, Kiera gave him an apologetic look. I'll be right back. He watched her walk onto the stage. The room quieted. Then the host's voice echoed through the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our event chairwoman, Kiera Stone, CEO of Stone Tech and the visionary behind this gala. Jacob's stomach dropped. CEO, the room erupted in applause as Kiera stepped up to the mic, calm and graceful, like she'd done this 100 times. He stared at her, stunned. She was a billionaire, and he was the guy who showed up with a backpack and a 6-year-old. His gut twisted, and suddenly the suit felt tighter, the room hotter. Backstage, Dylan's voice echoed in his head. Do I have to sit here the whole time? Jacob didn't wait. He turned and walked toward the hallway, already loosening his tie. He shouldn't have stayed. He had no business being here. Jacob stood outside the ballroom's back exit, the cold air biting at his collar as he tried to steady his breath. The city lights blurred behind the glass-paneled doors. He'd left Dylan with a sitter 2 rooms away but couldn't bring himself to walk back in. His hands were still clenched, knuckles tight with frustration. She wasn't just involved with the gala. She owned it. He stared at the cufflinks on his borrowed suit, suddenly aware of how misplaced he looked. The gold gleamed faintly under the overhead lights. He hadn't even noticed them until now. He unclipped one, then the other, slipping them into his jacket pocket. He didn't belong in that room. He never had. A voice behind him broke the silence. You left before I finished my speech. He turned slowly. Kiera stood in the shadow of the open doorway, her heels clicking softly as she stepped into the corridor, arms wrapped around herself, though she didn't seem cold. Her face was unreadable now, no clipboard, no polite smiles. I didn't want to interrupt, Jacob said, his voice lower than usual. Looked like you had it handled. You didn't interrupt, she said. You disappeared. He looked away. I shouldn't have stayed in the first place. Kiera's brow furrowed. Why? You run a tech empire, he said, meeting her eyes. I fix broken heaters and stack chairs. You see the disconnect? She took another step closer. I asked you to stay because I liked talking to you. Not because I needed another donor. Yeah, well, I don't exactly have much to donate, he muttered. Kiera moved past him to lean against the low railing overlooking the loading dock. The hum of traffic below echoed upward, but she didn't seem to notice. You think this is about money? I think it's about worlds, he said, stepping beside her. Yours is penthouses. Mine is overdue bills and second-hand clothes. You don't need to explain yourself to me. I get it now. She turned her head slowly toward him. You never asked me how I got here, he frowned. I figured you were born into it. I wasn't, she said. My mom cleaned offices after hours. I used to wait for her in the break room doing homework while she emptied recycling bins. My first computer was one someone threw out. He stared at her, caught off guard. I built Stone Tech because I had to, she continued. And yeah, now I sign checks the size of small houses, but that doesn't mean I forgot what it's like to choose between rent and groceries. Jacob looked down at his hands. You don't talk like someone who forgot. I saw you with your son today, she said, her voice softer now. You didn't complain once. You made him feel safe even when you were clearly exhausted. That matters more than any net worth. He didn't know what to say. The walls he'd thrown up were still there, but they didn't feel quite as solid now. I shouldn't have lied by omission, Kiera said after a beat. I didn't tell you who I was because I wanted to talk to you without the weight of it. I just liked being around you, he studied her. You're not what I expected. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Neither are you. A sharp gust of wind swept through the corridor, pulling her blouse tight against her. Without thinking, Jacob shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Her fingers caught the lapels gently, eyes never leaving his. You keep doing that, she murmured. Doing what? Taking care of people without realizing it. He exhaled slowly, his heart thudding louder than it should have. What do you want from me, Kiera? Her answer was immediate. Time, he blinked. I don't need promises or declarations, she added. Just time. To see if whatever this is could become something real. Jacob hesitated. The idea of letting someone in again, especially someone with more power than he could fathom, terrified him. But the way she looked at him wasn't condescending. It wasn't pity, it was genuine. I don't know how to fit into your world, he admitted. Then we'll make a different one, she said. One where Dylan gets his pancakes and I don't have to give speeches to impress anyone. Just Time, that's all." He didn't answer, not right away. But when she handed him back the jacket with a quiet thank you, he didn't step away. Instead, he said, "Dylan's gonna ask a lot of questions." "I hope so," Kiera said. "I like curious kids." He tilted his head. "You sure about this? I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't." They stood there in silence as the city moved around them, cars honking, horns echoing, lights flashing in the distance. And slowly the air between them changed, not perfect, not easy, but real. Jacob glanced back toward the ballroom doors. "Can you get us out of here without me having to shake any more hands?" Kiera's eyes lit up. "I know a back exit," he nodded. "Let me grab Dylan. He'll never forgive me if I leave without the mac and cheese." She waited as he disappeared down the hallway. A few minutes later, he returned, carrying a sleepy-eyed boy wrapped in a fuzzy gray sweater, holding a plastic fork in one hand. "Did you eat?" Kiera asked gently. Dylan squinted up at her. "3 bowls. Atta boy," Jacob said, adjusting him on his hip. She led them through the staff hallway, past stacked catering trays and garment bags until they stepped into a side parking lot. A black car waited at the curb, engine idling. Jacob looked at it warily. "That yours?" "Borrowed," she said, opening the door. "But the driver knows the best pancake spot in the city." He raised an eyebrow. "At this hour," she smiled. "It's New York. There's always pancakes." Jacob slid in beside Dylan, who had already curled into the seat and was half asleep again. As they pulled away from the gala, Kiera reached across the seat and gently laced her fingers through Jacob's. He didn't pull away. The diner was nearly empty when they arrived, its faded neon sign flickering against the glass windows. Inside, the scent of maple syrup and fried batter hung in the air, mingling with the low murmur of a jazz song playing through the ceiling speakers. Dylan, now fully awake and chatty, perched on a red vinyl booth seat, his fork stabbing at a mountain of pancakes with surgical precision. Jacob sat across from him, eyes heavy but alert, while Kiera stirred her coffee, her blazer folded neatly beside her, sleeves rolled to her elbows. "Is this your usual place?" she asked, watching Dylan drizzle syrup with the seriousness of a scientist. "Used to be," Jacob said. "Back when I worked nights at the repair shop across the street, this place never closed, so I'd come in after shifts and eat whatever I could afford." Kiera glanced around. "It has character." "It has burned coffee and sticky tables," he said, but there was a trace of affection in his voice. Dylan suddenly looked up, mouth full. "Miss Kiera, do you have a kid?" She blinked, surprised. "No, I don't. Do you want one?" Jacob nearly choked on his water. "Dylan?" Kiera laughed, not unkindly. "That's a big question." Dylan tilted his head. "I just think you'd be good at it." "Well," she said, smiling at him, "that's the nicest thing anyone said to me today." They paid in cash, Jacob insisted, and stepped outside just as the first hint of dawn colored the sky in pale pinks and silvers. The city was quieter now, slower, as if it too had stayed out too late. Jacob lifted Dylan into the backseat of the car, buckling him in as the boy yawned. When he turned around, Kiera was leaning against the side of the car, her expression unreadable. "Are you always this calm with everything?" he asked. She looked at him. "Only when I have no idea what I'm doing." He crossed his arms. "You didn't seem lost back at the gala." "I've had years to practice looking like I know what I'm doing," she said. "But tonight, this. I didn't expect any of it." He studied her, the way her voice dipped just slightly, not out of sadness but vulnerability. He wasn't used to that from people like her, people with entire companies under their name. "I'm not good at this kind of thing," he admitted. "Whatever this is." "Neither am I," she said, "but I'm willing to figure it out if you are." He glanced at the car, then back at her. "I start at the auto yard at 7. I can't just disappear." "I don't want you to disappear," she said. "I want to see what your life actually looks like. You want to see an oil-stained uniform and a boss who still uses a flip phone." She stepped closer. "I want to see where you feel like yourself." The honesty in her voice caught him off guard again. He wasn't used to people following through when they said things like that. "You're not going to like it," he said. "Let me decide that." They agreed to meet again the following evening, his neighborhood, his terms. No suits, no speeches, just real life. The next day dragged on. Jacob worked 3 jobs back to back. A busted radiator on East 34th, a leaky kitchen pipe uptown, and a last-minute call from a landlord whose building hadn't had hot water in 2 days. By the time he made it home, Dylan was already finishing his homework with the neighbor, who handed Jacob a grocery list of things they were running low on. He barely had time to shower before Kiera texted that she was outside. He looked down at his hoodie clean but faded and jeans that still smelled faintly of bleach. Then he opened the door. She stood by the curb, dressed in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, holding a paper bag. "What's that?" he asked. "Dinner," she said. "I figured you might not have had time." He stepped aside as she walked in, taking in the small apartment without comment. It was neat, lived in. A few drawings taped to the fridge, a cracked lamp held together with duct tape. Dylan came running out of the back room in socks that didn't match. "Miss Kiera, did you bring mac and cheese again?" "Better," she said, crouching to his level. "Burgers with fries." He raised his arms like a referee calling a touchdown. Yes, they sat on the floor with paper plates, the coffee table pushed aside to make room. Dylan told her about a book he was reading while she listened like it was the most important story in the world. After he eventually nodded off on the couch, curled into a blanket, Jacob and Kiera sat side by side on the floor, backs against the wall. "I didn't expect you to actually show up," he said. She looked at him. "Why not? People like you don't usually cross bridges for people like me." She turned her head. "Then maybe you've been around the wrong kind of people." He didn't answer right away. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was careful, deliberate, like both of them were afraid to ruin it by saying too much. "Do you ever get tired of it?" he asked finally. "What? The pressure, the spotlight, being the one everyone's watching." She didn't move. "Every day." "But I built that stage, so I can't complain about the lights." He looked at her, something in his chest shifting. "You don't have to be that person here. And who do I get to be? Just Kiera." She gave a soft nod, then glanced over at Dylan. "He's lucky to have you. I don't always get it right. None of us do. But you show up. That counts for more than people think." He leaned his head back against the wall, eyes on the ceiling. "You sure you're okay being here? I'm exactly where I want to be," she said. He turned toward her, about to say something else, but she leaned in first. Her lips met his, soft and sure. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was the kind of kiss that said, "I see you and I'm not running." Jacob didn't pull away. "When they parted," she whispered, "still think you don't belong in my world." He touched her cheek gently, voice low. "Maybe you're the one who belongs in mine." Jacob adjusted the strap of Dylan's backpack as they walked up the steps of the newly reopened community center. The morning had started early. He dropped off a space heater at an elderly tenant's place before sunrise, and had barely managed to get Dylan dressed and fed in time. But now, as the boy ran ahead to join the other kids in the after-school program, something in Jacob finally loosened. Kiera had arranged for the center's youth wing to stay open longer during the week, quietly, without ceremony. She hadn't told Jacob until the director mentioned it in passing. He hadn't asked how she made it happen, he knew, but she hadn't done it to impress him. She'd done it because she listened. As he stepped back outside, she was already waiting by the curb, leaning against a sleek black SUV, sunglasses perched on her head, a large paper bag in one hand. "You brought food again?" he asked, walking toward her. "You haven't eaten," she said, holding it out. "And I know you skipped lunch yesterday. Don't pretend you didn't." He took it with a quiet laugh, peeking inside. "You're going to ruin me." "That's the plan," she said, her tone light but eyes steady. "Come on. I want to show you something." They drove north, away from the city's crush of buildings and noise, until the skyline gave way to trees just starting to bloom. When he looked over at her, she was staring ahead, one hand resting on the window. "You okay?" he asked. "I signed off on something big this morning," she said. "A new development deal. It's going to change a lot of things." He waited, sensing there was more, but it felt different this time. Like I wasn't doing it just to win, or because I needed to prove something. She turned toward him, her voice quieter now. "I think I finally stopped running." Jacob didn't respond right away. He understood the feeling more than she knew. That slow, unexpected stillness that came when you stopped surviving and started living. The car pulled into a gated driveway, and the driver parked near a modest 2-story house with a wide porch and ivy climbing up the side. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream wealth. It just looked like a home. She stepped out and opened the gate. It used to belong to my aunt. She passed away a few years ago and left it to me, but I couldn't bring myself to sell it. He walked beside her, the gravel crunching under his boots. Why are we here? I've been fixing it up little by little, she said. I was going to lease it, but I don't think I want to anymore. He stopped at the porch steps, watching her. I know you're proud, she said, facing him. I know you'd never take anything you didn't earn. This isn't a charity offer. I didn't ask for anything, he said, his voice calm but firm. I know, she said. That's why I'm offering. Not as a billionaire, not even as the woman who kissed you on your living room floor, just as someone who sees what you've built on your own and wants to build something with you. Jacob looked at the house, then at her. You're talking about more than a porch and a roof. I'm talking about a life, she said. One where you're not constantly choosing between your son's needs and your own, where you don't have to carry everything alone. He didn't speak, not yet. Because part of him was still trying to catch up to the idea that someone like her wasn't just passing through his life. She was offering to stay. You think we can actually make this work? He asked. I think we already are, she said. But I don't want it to be something we're figuring out between shifts and late-night takeout. I want to wake up with you. I want Dylan to have a backyard. I want us to have a shot at real. He stepped up beside her, the wind catching the edge of her hair. You're not scared. I'm terrified, she said, smiling faintly, but I've never been more sure. He glanced back at the car, then toward the quiet house. Dylan would love this. I know, she said. There's space for his drawings on the fridge. And his pancakes in the kitchen. Jacob drew a slow breath, then nodded once. Then I guess we better go inside. Later that evening, after they picked up Dylan and brought him to see the place, the boy darted through each room like a whirlwind, shouting out where his bed would go, where his books would live, where the cat they didn't yet have would sleep. Kiera laughed along, following him from room to room, pointing out little things she remembered from her childhood. Jacob stood in the kitchen, watching them both. The hum of Dylan's voice upstairs, Kiera's laughter echoing down the hall, it all felt surreal, but it wasn't a fantasy. It was happening. That night they sat on the porch while Dylan fell asleep in a sleeping bag in the guest room. The stars were brighter out there, the city far enough away not to drown them out. You never told me what made you stop running, he said. She looked out over the lawn, then at him. You did. He reached across the bench, lacing his fingers through hers. So what now, she said. We build something together. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers with the kind of certainty that only came when both people had nothing left to prove. When they pulled apart, she rested her head against his shoulder. No gala, no headlines, no pressure, just the beginning of something they both never thought they'd have, a place to belong, a home. Kiera's heels clicked steadily against the polished stone floor of the city courthouse as she entered with Dylan's hand in hers. Jacob walked beside them, his tie slightly askew and his shirt collar open, the way he always wore it when he was nervous but trying to pretend otherwise. Dylan looked up at her with a wrinkled brow. Wait, is this where people get in trouble? Sometimes, she said, squeezing his hand. But not today. Jacob leaned down. Today's about something good, champ, you'll see. It had been 3 months since they'd moved into the house. 3 months of pancakes on weekends, muddy sneakers in the hallway, and late-night whispers that turned into laughter under shared blankets. 3 months of cautious joy turning into something deeper, steadier, real. Now they were here to finalize something that had quietly changed everything, legal guardianship. Jacob had full custody, of course, but after weeks of whispered questions from Dylan, can she come to parent night? Will she be there if I get sick? Jacob had asked her one night while folding laundry if she wanted to be his emergency contact. She'd said no. I want more than that, she'd told him, her voice calm. I want to be his family. So here they were. The judge was kind-eyed and efficient, flipping through papers and asking Dylan a few questions. Kiera sat upright, hands folded in her lap, while Jacob kept his arm around Dylan's shoulders. Do you want Miss Stone to be part of your family? The judge asked gently. Dylan nodded. She already is. Kiera's throat tightened, but she didn't let it show until they were outside again, the official documents tucked neatly into Jacob's jacket pocket. They walked a few blocks to a small bakery Dylan loved. Kiera held the door open while he darted ahead toward the glass display of cupcakes. Jacob stepped beside her, brushing his fingers over hers. Was that harder than buying a tech company? He asked. She let out a breath. Terrifying. Worth it, she looked at him, her eyes soft. Completely. That evening, Jacob grilled chicken in the backyard while Dylan painted the old wooden fence with watercolors. Kiera sat on the porch steps, her bare feet tucked beneath her, sipping from a glass of lemonade and watching the two of them. Jacob came over, wiping his hands on a towel. He told the neighbor you're his official person now, she smiled. That's the best title I've ever had, he crouched beside her. I've been thinking dangerous, I know, but it's time. She turned toward him. Time for what? He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, weathered box. She stared at it. I didn't buy something new, he said. This was my mother's. She wore it until the day she passed. Said it reminded her what love felt like when everything else got messy. Kiera opened the box slowly. Inside rested a thin gold band with a single oval diamond, set low and simple. I don't have a mansion, he said softly, but I've got a home, and a son who thinks you hung the moon. And I've got this ridiculous, stubborn love for you that doesn't go away, no matter how many times I try to act like I'm not scared out of my mind. She blinked fast, her fingers trembling. I love you, Kiera, and I want you to marry me, not because of the house or Dylan or anything else. Just because I can't imagine waking up another day without you next to me. She didn't say anything at first, just reached for his face with both hands and kissed him, long and slow, her forehead pressed to his when they finally pulled apart. Yes, she whispered. Of course, yes. They didn't plan a grand wedding. No reporters, no press releases. Just a small ceremony in the backyard 6 weeks later under string lights and a sky full of stars. Dylan wore a bow tie and passed out flowers to the guests. Jacob stood in a navy shirt and gray slacks, his hands steady as he placed the ring on her finger. They danced barefoot on the grass while Dylan twirled around them, and when the music faded, they didn't notice. They were too busy making promises in the silence. The seasons turned. Autumn painted the trees gold, and Kiera started working remotely 3 days a week, balancing spreadsheets while Dylan built forts in the living room. Jacob took on fewer emergency jobs, focusing instead on a small team he'd hired to help maintain apartment buildings across the borough. They carved pumpkins together, and Kiera burned the first batch of cookies at Christmas. Dylan insisted they still eat them. On the first warm day of spring, she stood on the porch, her hand resting on her stomach, waiting for Jacob to come around the corner. He did, wiping grease from his hands, one eyebrow raised. You okay? He asked. She nodded, then caught his hand and pressed it gently where the flutter had started. It took a moment. Then he froze. She didn't need to say anything. His eyes met hers, wide and full. When she whispered, "We're having a baby," he didn't say a word. Just pulled her into his arms and held her for a long, long time. That summer they planted a garden in the backyard. Dylan insisted on strawberries. Kiera chose lavender. Jacob didn't care as long as they did it together. And when the nights got long again, and the baby's crib sat waiting in the corner of their bedroom, they would lie in bed, hands intertwined, laughter soft in the darkness. They built a life out of quiet choices, fierce love, and the kind of strength that didn't need to shout to be real. Not perfect, but full, and theirs.